Hello, I am going to speak today about translation. Yeah. If I say that all human beings are translators, would you agree with me? Well, the Italian philosopher Gramsci once said that all human beings are philosophers. Okay, he was thinking about what he called philosophy in everyday life. When I say that all human beings are good translators, I mean they have this ability to translate within them. Very simple, because all human languages have ultimately derived from the same language, same parent language, which existed 70 to 80,000 years ago. Much research has gone into this, and now it is more or less established. So, again, what Chomsky said about what he called universal grammar. There is an underlying core grammatical structure for all languages. Okay, so you have, in other words, all languages within you. That's why you are good translators. Okay, Chomsky would say that when you speak another language, you speak a second language, you simply switch on another language. It is already there. Okay, you pick it up and then you switch it on. Okay. Now, having said this, I must make it clear that all people are not equally good translators. Some are good translators, some are indifferent, mediocre translators, and some are bad translators. Okay, this happens everywhere. Now, one also finds that you are not a good translator in all domains. You are a good translator in certain domains, while you are a bad translator or a poor translator in certain other domains. You may be a good translator of literature, but you may be a poor translator of technical subjects, knowledge texts, as they are called. Okay, you might be a good translator of news in the media, okay, in journalism, but your translation of technical text, scientific text would be poor. So this is the ground situation. So, but certainly translation is a creative activity. Okay, no doubt about that. And translators are not people who create secondary material. Okay, now their creativity has been recognized as being on a par with people who write what we often call original text. So a translation is as original as any text which we call original. Okay. Only thing is, a translation is inspired by, or a translation has a first text or an antecedent text before it. It's okay. So your translation is a rewriting of a first text or an antecedent text. Okay. So I think this is clear. Okay. So the most important thing for a translator is to realize, in a process of self-examination, how good he is or she is as a translator. Okay, and in what domain the translation would work better for him or her. This is, I think, the core idea, the idea at the very center of our thinking on translation. All right. Okay. So many people ask this question: are translators born or made? So from what I have already said, it would be clear to you that translators are indeed born. No doubt about that, they're born. Okay, but they can hone their skills. They can become better translators through training. Okay, so by training I would mean practice in the particular domain in which they are translating. Okay, and also acquiring awareness about translation, the process of how translation actually takes place. This they can do both by looking at what they have translated, looking at what other people have translated, and also through some theoretical knowledge. Okay, it's always good. Okay, although theory doesn't help you to become a translator in the first place. Okay, so for instance, one of the common things which we discuss in translation still is the notion of fidelity or faithfulness. So, should a translation be faithful? People often ask. I would say that you cannot expect faithfulness because of two reasons. One, is the divergence between the source language and the target language in structure and usage. So Malayalam is not structured like English. There are a number of differences, including one of the most basic things, word order. Subject, verb, object in English, subject, object, verb in Malayalam. You know that. Okay. So this is only an elementary example. There are plenty of examples. Collocations, use of adjectives, so on, and so forth. Right. And also the usage that each language has acquired over a period of time. Okay. So this is different for any two languages, even if they are very close to each other, like Tamil and Malayalam, or English and German. These are languages which are very close to each other. But in spite of their family relationship, in spite of their cultural proximity, we find that they don't have either an identical or near identical structure nor a pattern of usage. This we find everywhere. This needn't even be mentioned. Too common for discussion. Okay. And the other thing, equally important, is the cultural difference between the two. You know that very well. Because we find that what you say very coolly in one language cannot be said in another. Okay. Think of expletives, what we call theri in Malayalam. Okay. So can a language which uses expletives profusely, okay, think of a language, think of such a language. So if you translate from such a language into another language which has a tradition of using very few expletives, okay, you have a habit of speaking politely, you don't have a habit of firing off at people, okay. So in such cases you often tone down the kind of expletives that you use. Sometimes you omit them altogether. So this is just one example. So cultural differences. What some cultures observe as taboo. You can't even mention certain things in certain cultures. So that is why we have to abandon the idea of faithfulness or fidelity in translation. Okay. Now that's also why we say that translation occurs not between two languages but between two cultures. Okay. Now another very interesting question is, how do we actually translate? Do we take each word and phrase, examine them, and then find an equivalent? I don't think it's possible. All translators look at portions of text and translate almost automatically. Of course, afterwards they edit it. To make the translation effective or acceptable. That's a second process. Okay. The primary process is the translation, which occurs almost automatically. Now there is a branch of translation studies called cognitive translation studies, which try to study the activities that occur in the brain while we translate. Okay. So they use very advanced gadgets, okay, to find, for instance, the electrical impulses in the brain. What happens? What kind of shock? What kind of movements happen in the brain? Okay. So this is an advanced kind of research area. But we realize this very well, that the translation is now almost an automatic activity, and it comes to us, so to say. All right. Now, when we think of translation, I think every translator at some point, apart from the creativity involved, a translator thinks about whether she can make a living out of translation. Whether it is a remunerative activity. Yes, it is. All kinds of translations happen in the country. Okay, many of them highly remunerative. Take the National Translation Mission, which is based at the Center of Indian Languages. Okay, Central Institute of Indian Languages at Mysore. National Translation Mission, called NTM for short. So this organization has undertaken a project to translate knowledge texts. Okay, what we call knowledge texts. Okay, all branches of knowledge. Okay, sciences, social sciences. Okay, physics, chemistry, biosciences, history, economics, all branches of knowledge. Thousands of books have already been translated. Okay, they are still looking for translators. Translators are in great demand, and they pay. Please note this: a rupee a word. So if you translate a book of 10,000 words, you get 10,000 rupees. Some of my students undertook such translation from the NTM. Okay, and there are other agencies which pay even more than that. Okay, so in the European Union, if you take on the average, a translator gets around half a euro per word. So half a euro is about 45 rupees now at current exchange rates. Not bad. Okay. So look at, and so the faster you translate, the more money you make. Only provided that your translation is effective. If you come up with a bad translation, it affects your career, definitely. Nobody will give you a text to translate after that. Okay. So it's a remunerative work. It's also a job, a task which has to be accomplished carefully. Okay, that's what I said. That's what I meant when I talked about editing your translation. Okay, all right. So the translation of knowledge text is only one activity which is going on. There are other kinds of translations, such as, for example, the best known translation activity, translation of literary texts. Okay. Once upon a time, when we talked about translation, we talked only about literary translation. It has changed. Now, literary translation occupies less than 5% of all the translation activity, not only in India, in the world as such. So there are other kinds of translation. As I said, besides knowledge texts, you have translations in the media, news translation. Okay, look at what happens in any newspaper in the country. They have translators at the desk. Sometimes at least half a dozen translators who translate news items which come in from news agencies which send news in many languages, not just English. You have news items coming in Arabic, in Russian, all major languages of the world. News agencies which operate in these languages. So you require translators at the desk. So this is again a very remunerative activity. The very fact that you are appointed as, let us say, a sub-editor in a daily would be a testament to your ability as a translator, quite often. Because if you are a good translator, your chances of being appointed at a newspaper are very high, right? And think of all the translations which occur in the visual medium. Okay, look at the large number of films which are dubbed or subtitled in other languages. Okay, you can't imagine the volume of such translation. A film like what was that? Bangalore Days in Malayalam. It has been subtitled not only in Hindi, but as far as I know, in all the other Dravidian languages, plus a few more languages. So imagine this. What we thought was only a regional language film, acquiring a much wider audience. Many Tamil films have been translated into Japanese. Can you imagine? Or Chinese. Okay, where because of the kind of text they have become popular in other countries. Okay, so translation in the audiovisual media is a very prolific activity today, and even scripts. Forget about subtitling and dubbing. You also have films remade in other languages. So you translate the scripts. Okay, which is also a highly remunerative activity, translating scripts. Okay, and then of course you have what is called sign language translation. Have you thought about how this is done? You must have seen news read in sign language. I am using the word read for convenience. Okay, signed, let us say, news signed in sign language. Okay, now this is a very an activity which is becoming more and more common in the medium. Okay, some channels have sign language news every day. Okay, so the sign language has been standardized now. Okay, you have what is called Indian Sign Language (ISL). You have AMSLAN, American Sign Language. Okay, standardized forms of sign language, which as you should know is equally complex as natural languages. So you have to learn them. You have to learn the complexities of the signs before you translate into and from sign language. Okay, and in a multilingual country like India, all these forms of translation. I think I should mention one more form, which is called audio description. This is the translation of visuals for the visually challenged. Okay, so if they are asked to access what is happening now, okay, I am making a presentation. So the audio description will also talk about my profile, what I look like, and where I sit, and if there is an audience before me, details about the audience. All these will be described in the background. Okay, so this is called audio description. It is also becoming a very highly remunerative form of translation. In America, Walt Disney started this a few years ago. Now here in India also, it's emerging as one of the common forms of translation. Okay, now finally, I should talk about tips for translators. People often ask me, for example, I've been around for more than 3 decades as both a translator and a translation scholar. So people ask me, so how do you translate this text? Is it possible to translate a word like charupadi? How do you translate it? How do you translate Onapudava? All kinds of questions people ask me. So these and other interesting questions have been discussed by translation scholars. Okay, translation scholars like Peter Newmark, for example, whose approaches to translation is a very interesting book. Tells you about translation in various contexts, what to do with certain items in translation. Okay, all kinds of strategies are worked out. Okay, omission, over translation, under translation. Okay, so here's a book which gives you very interesting tips about translation. And people who work in this area will remember a great translator and translation scholar who headed a Bible translation mission. A translator and translation scholar called Eugene A. Naida, who has written several works on translation. He has extensive notes and guidelines for translators. He has a scheme, what he calls a schema for translation. Okay, he has given you a diagrammatic representation of translation. How translation happens, for example, he would say a translator analyzes the text, then he translates the text without actually being aware of the process into the target language. Then he restructures it. This 3-way process: analysis, transfer, restructuring. Naida's schema. And the transference, okay, transferring of text from one language into another happens automatically, as I said at the beginning. So Naida was talking about that, and his schema, I think, is still valuable. I think it's more than 4 decades old. This schema, he came up with this schema in the late 50s. It's still valuable for us. Okay, a book like Douglas Robinson's how to become a good translator. It's available. So all these books, not only Douglas Robinson's, but all these books I have been talking about, they are available for free download on the net. Anybody can download them. They are not expensive. Okay, even if you buy them, they are not expensive. So these guidelines, these handbooks, there are also other books called Handbooks for Translators. There are many available. Okay, so these books help you in various ways. Douglas Robinson's book, for example, it helps you to know, to come to a very balanced awareness of the requirements of a translator. Okay, not just awareness or knowledge of two languages, not that, not even awareness about the differences between the two, structurally and culturally, but also about the particular aptitudes of the translator, the skills of the translator, the attitudes of the translator. Okay, even the ambience. Okay, so one can talk about that when you sit at peace with yourself. Okay, people say both for writing and translation, such a situation is ideal. Right. So Douglas Robinson speaks about such things too. Okay, and such books you can read, not very, intently or in large numbers, because ultimately I would like to remind translators, as a translator and a translation scholar, that such books are useful only if you have first identified yourself as a translator, if you have correctly recognized that you are a translator. As I said in the beginning, all human beings are translators, but all human beings are not equally effective translators, and all human beings are not good translators in all domains. So once you have realized your potential as a translator in one domain or more, certainly these books would be useful to you. Once you realize your aptitude and skills, then of course you're on the way to becoming a good translator, probably a great translator. Thank you.